Good Tuesday morning to you. This is Pastor Mark Pierce of Church Requel, back with another Bible study, our 110th Bible study, if anyone is still counting. We are taking a look at the Sermon on the Mount. Actually, we're working our way all the way through the Gospel of Matthew, but for some time now we've been looking at the Sermon on the Mount, and we want to continue our look at what Jesus has to say about divorce in the Sermon on the Mount. We'll find that in Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 and 32. Again, let me just read that for you. It was also said, this is Jesus speaking, it was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, one of the things that I told you yesterday was that it's important for us to have not only a feel for where we are at currently in terms of our present culture, because oftentimes when we read Scripture, we read it with the lens of where we are at now. And so yesterday I spent the whole session just talking a little bit about where divorce is at in America. But I think it's also very important for us, if we really are to grapple with and understand these Scriptures, is that we should also have some historical and cultural understanding of the setting that we find ourselves in when we're reading Scripture. It just brings it alive a little bit for me when I have done these studies. And this is something that you can do very easily simply by going down to the library and doing a little bit of homework. And the question you might ask is, do I really want to know that much about it? And for me, and beyond the fact that I'm supposedly a professional as a pastor, it's just a passion to really know the culture and the history that we find in Jesus' day, especially when it comes to this issue of divorce. There's a lot to learn here. Let's take a look at it from the Roman perspective, because certainly the Romans dominated the world scene in the first century. And we find that the Romans have quite a history, a very positive history when it comes to the issue of divorce. But the present day was quite a bit different when Jesus was saying these words. Historically speaking, the Romans actually had a more positive view of women than what most cultures had of that day. The Roman matron, the head of the wife, head of the household, was not secluded like she was for the Greek counterpart of her day. We'll talk about the Greeks on our next session. The Roman matron took full part in life. And another thing from a Roman perspective, at least historically speaking, now it had changed by the time that Jesus came on the scene, but historically, the prostitute was really held in contempt, and it was quite a dishonor to be found in a house of ill repute. In fact, this is a stat that I had not at all been aware of. For the first 500 years of the Roman Commonwealth, again going back probably 700 or so years prior to Jesus' day, but for that first 500 years of the Roman Commonwealth, there was not a single recorded case of divorce. Imagine that. In fact, the very first man, we actually know the very first man to divorce his wife in the Roman Commonwealth was a fellow by the name of Spurius Cavilius Ruga in the year 234 BC. So we go almost 500 years with no divorce. About 200 or so more years before Christ, we see the very first divorce. And that was primarily because the woman could not have a child and the man wanted to have children, and so he divorced his wife. Well, what happened about 200 years or so before Christ is that the Greeks came on the scene. And the Greeks have a very different view of women at this point than what the Romans do. Now, it's interesting that the Romans actually conquered militarily the Greeks, but it could also be said that the Greeks conquered the Romans when it came to culture and social and morality issues. We'll look at that probably tomorrow, because I don't think we'll have time to get into all of it today. There are two Roman speeches, though, that I think could be both that are within 100 years or so of Jesus' day that give us a bit of a sense of where the Roman world was at in Jesus' day. This is from Metellus Numidius, who is a Roman orator, and he says this in a famous speech: "If, Romans, it were possible to love without wives, we would be free from trouble. But since it is the law of nature that we can neither live pleasantly with them, nor at all without them, we must take thought for the continuance of the race rather than for our own brief pleasure." Again, that's Metellus Numidius, a Roman orator. So, the wife was not looked upon by Jesus' day in glowing terms at all, but not nearly as bad as what the Greeks had in mind, as we'll see tomorrow. There was a common Roman jest that was in play during Jesus' day, and that is that, again, from the Romans, marriage brings only 2 happy days: the day when the husband first clasps his wife to his breast, and the day when he lays her in the tomb. Now, that's kind of the Roman worldview when it comes to the issue of marriage and wives. And this is the environment that Jesus is speaking in. Tomorrow, when we come together, we're going to continue our historical look at the issue of divorce in Jesus' day by taking a look at the Greek attitude towards women and the Greeks' attitude towards marriage. And then after that, we're going to come back and take a look at the Hebrew mindset, because remember, when Jesus is coming on the scene and he's talking on the Sermon on the Mount, he's talking to a crowd that has been overpowered completely by the Romans, have been greatly influenced by the Greeks, but have the history and the background of God's people as Hebrews. And it's into this that Jesus interjects his speaking about divorce. And I don't think we can really understand that until we understand well the historical background of the people that he's speaking to. So thanks for joining me today, and tomorrow we'll talk again about the Greeks that Jesus is possibly addressing. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you again tomorrow.